Not every weapon makes it to the battlefield. Some were too expensive, some were too dangerous, some were simply beaten by a better design, and some were so catastrophically wrong that the engineers who built them spent the rest of their careers pretending they didn't. These are 25 weapons that consumed billions of dollars, decades of engineering, and the careers of thousands of people, and never fired a single shot in anger. American weapons. XB-70 Valkyrie, the bomber that killed itself, designed to fly at Mach 3 at 70,000 feet and drop nuclear bombs before any interceptor could catch it. Then the Soviets developed the SA-2 missile, which could reach 70,000 feet. ICBMs made its mission concept obsolete. 2 prototypes were built. During a publicity flight in 1966, one collided with a chase aircraft and was destroyed. The other sits in a museum in Dayton, Ohio. The most advanced bomber of its era was cancelled not by the enemy, but by its own obsolescence. YF-23 Black Widow, the plane that was too good. In the competition to build America's next stealth fighter, Northrop's YF-23 competed against Lockheed's YF-22. By most technical assessments, the YF-23 was faster and stealthier. The Air Force chose the YF-22 anyway, citing production risk and Lockheed's stronger institutional relationships. The YF-23 sits in a museum. The aircraft that won became the F-22, one of the most expensive fighters in history, built in far smaller numbers than planned. Whether the right plane won remains one of aviation's most debated questions. F-20 Tiger Shark, killed by politics. Northrop built the F-20 on its own money. No government contract, no guaranteed buyer. Betting export customers would choose a cheaper alternative to the F-16. It performed comparably in most metrics. The Reagan administration blocked its export sales, preferring to sell F-16S to allies. 3 prototypes were built. 2 crashed during demonstrations. The program was cancelled in 1986 after Northrop had spent $1.2 billion of its own money with nothing to show for it. Ra-66, Comanche, the invisible helicopter. Boeing and Sikorsky spent 22 years and nearly $7 billion developing a stealth reconnaissance helicopter. 2 prototypes flew successfully. In 2004, the Army cancelled the entire program, concluding that drones could perform the same mission at a fraction of the cost. 22 years, $7 billion, 2 aircraft, not a single one entered service. M247, Sergeant York, the gun that shot at everything. Except enemies, designed to protect tank formations from Soviet helicopters. During testing, its radar locked onto a ventilation fan on a latrine building and attempted to engage it. At a demonstration attended by the Secretary of Defense, it locked onto the bleachers of the reviewing stand. After 50 vehicles built and $1.8 billion spent, the Army cancelled it in 1985. The weapon designed to protect American tanks could not reliably distinguish between a Soviet helicopter and a toilet fan. Future Combat Systems, the $19 billion ghost. The most ambitious Army modernization in American history, 18 vehicle and weapons programs bundled into one integrated networked battlefield system. The Iraq War exposed the fatal flaw. It was designed for peer warfare, not counterinsurgency. Requirements changed constantly. Costs exploded. Secretary Gates canceled the entire program in 2009 after $19 billion had been spent. Not a single vehicle entered service. XM, 2001 Crusader, the howitzer that weighed too much. The most advanced self-propelled howitzer ever designed. Automated loading, extreme range, high rate of fire. It weighed 40 tons. No American aircraft could transport it economically to a distant theater. Cancelled in 2002 after $2.2 billion spent. Some of its loading technology was later incorporated into the M109A7 Paladin, the system it was supposed to replace. The gun that failed improved the gun it couldn't replace. Expeditionary Fighting Vehicle, the amphibious failure. The Marine Corps needed a vehicle that could reach beaches at 29 knots from 25 miles offshore. The EFV achieved that speed. At that speed, engines overheated and mechanical failures multiplied. $3.3 billion was spent over 20 years. Cancelled in 2011. The Marines still operate upgraded versions of the AAV-7 it was supposed to replace in the 1990s. YAL, one airborne laser, the 747, that couldn't shoot, straight mount a megawatt laser on a Boeing 747 and destroy ballistic missiles in boost phase. The physics worked. In 2010, it successfully shot down 2 missile targets in tests. The problem? It needed to fly within 200 kilometers of the launch site, directly into enemy air defenses. $5 billion spent. Cancelled in 2011. The laser worked. The operational concept was suicidal. A 12 Avenger II, the most expensive nothing in aviation history. The Navy's classified stealth bomber was so secret that its 2 contractors, McDonnell Douglas and General Dynamics, were not permitted to share design data with each other. Neither company knew what the other was building. Weight grew 30% over specifications. Costs doubled. Cancelled in 1991 before a single aircraft had flown. Litigation ran for 23 years. Total cost of a program that produced 0 aircraft, approximately $5 billion. Soviet, Russian weapons. The Ukraina plan, the Caspian Sea monster NATO, spotted it in 1967 and spent years trying to classify it. 92 meters long, 540 tons, flying at 500 kilometers per hour just meters above the water. Too low for radar, too fast for ships. It exploited ground effect lift near the surface. It could only operate in calm water. It crashed in 1980. The Soviet Union built more, then the USSR collapsed and funding ended. The largest ground effect vehicle ever built solved a problem that did not need solving at a scale no ocean could accommodate. MiG 1.44, the Soviet F-22 that ran out of money, designed in the 1980s to counter the F-22, featuring canards, thrust vectoring, internal weapons bays, and reduced radar cross-section. Then the Soviet Union collapsed. The prototype flew twice, in 2000 and 2001. The Russian Air Force chose the Su-57 instead. Cancelled without completing its test program. A 5th-generation fighter killed not by a rival design, but by an economic collapse that happened before it could prove itself. Object 477 Boxer, the tank that never was. The most ambitious Soviet tank design since World War II. Unmanned turret, crew in armored hull capsule. 152mm auto-loaded gun, active protection system. Every feature that defines 21st century tank design was present in this 1980s prototype. The Soviet collapse killed it before production. Russia spent the next 30 years building modernized T-72s instead. The future of tank design existed in 1985. It was cancelled by history. Buran. One flight, then nothing. The Soviet space shuttle flew exactly once. On November 15th, 1988, it completed 2 orbits unmanned and landed automatically, a feat the American space shuttle could not perform. Then funding was cut as the USSR began to collapse. In 2002, a hangar roof collapsed under snow, destroying the only flown Buran orbiter and killing 8 workers. The most sophisticated spacecraft the Soviet Union ever built was crushed by a roof it had no money to maintain. Tu-160 production collapse. Unfinished bombers. When the USSR dissolved in 1991, 19 Tu-160 bombers were in various stages of production at Kazan. Work stopped. Airframes sat in the open air for years. Several were scrapped. 8 completed Tu-160s stationed in Ukraine were transferred to Russia in exchange for debt cancellation. Operational bombers traded for gas debts. Russia did not resume production until 2015. The most powerful strategic bomber in the world sat unfinished in a factory because no government had money to complete it. German weapons. Landkreuzer P-1000 Ratte, The tank that would have sunk Hitler approved the design in 1942, 1,000 tons, two 280mm naval guns, 8 20mm cannons. No existing European bridge could support it. Any road it drove on would be destroyed by its weight. Albert Speer cancelled it in 1943, noting that Allied air power would destroy it before it reached the front. The largest tank ever designed never moved under its own power. Horton Ho 229, the stealth jet 50 years early. In 1944, the Horton brothers flew a flying wing jet that Northrop Grumman later tested and found had a significantly reduced radar cross-section, effectively the world's first stealth aircraft. It flew at 950 kilometers per hour and could carry 2,000 kilograms of bombs. 3 prototypes were ordered. The war ended before a single production aircraft was completed. The surviving airframe sits at the Smithsonian. An aircraft that anticipated stealth technology by 50 years was cancelled by the collapse of the regime that built it. British and Commonwealth weapons. TSR-2, the aircraft that changed British politics. The TSR-2 was supersonic at low level, nuclear capable, and exceeded performance specifications when it flew in 1964. The British government cancelled it in 1965, not because it failed, but because the Americans offered F-111s as a cheaper alternative. The F-111s were never delivered. The engineers who built the TSR-2 watched it being cut apart with angle grinders. Several wept. It was killed by a budget decision based on promises that were never kept. Avro Arrow, Canada's greatest mistake. The CF-105 was the most advanced interceptor in the world when it flew in 1958. Mach 2 at 50,000 feet with fly-by-wire controls, years ahead of anything in production. Canada cancelled it in 1959, choosing American Bomark missiles instead. The Bomark missiles proved ineffective. Canada never again built a domestically designed combat aircraft. The engineers were immediately recruited by NASA and contributed to Apollo. Canada cancelled its way out of aerospace independence and never returned. CVA-01, the carrier. Britain never built. Britain cancelled plans for a 53,000-ton fleet carrier in 1966. During the 1982 Falklands War, the Royal Navy fought with 2 small carriers that were themselves scheduled for retirement. The conflict was won, barely. 3 decades later, Britain finally commissioned HMS Queen Elizabeth. It took 50 years, and the lessons of a nearly lost war to reverse a budget decision made in an afternoon. Other nations. I Lavi. The fighter America killed Israel designed the Lavi as a domestically produced fighter to achieve independence from foreign aircraft supply. By 1986, the prototype was flying impressively. The United States, funding part of its development, applied enormous pressure to cancel it, recognizing it would compete with the F-16 on the export market. Israel cancelled it in 1987. The engineers and technology transferred to China, which used the experience to develop the J-10. America killed an Israeli fighter to protect its export market and inadvertently armed China. AMX-40, the tank nobody wanted France, developed the AMX-40 specifically for export in the early 1980s. Saudi Arabia evaluated it and chose the M1. Spain evaluated it and chose the Leopard 2. Iraq evaluated it and chose the T-72. France built 4 prototypes and abandoned the program after years of failed sales. A capable tank killed not by technical failure, but by a market that didn't need it. Mitsubishi F3, first concept, Japan's abandoned fighter. Japan's attempt at a fully indigenous 5th-generation fighter was revised multiple times before the program was restructured into a collaborative development with the UK and Italy as the Global Combat Air Program. What began as a purely Japanese national fighter became an international joint program. Full domestic aerospace independence was quietly abandoned in favor of something that might actually be built. TFX, first design, Turkey's engine problem. Turkey's Khan fighter began with a design that assumed domestic engine development would be achieved in parallel with the airframe. When it became clear that a competitive indigenous turbofan could not be ready in time, the original design was revised for foreign engines. The Khan eventually flew in 2023 with a General Electric engine, an aircraft that exists, but not as the fully independent platform originally envisioned, a program that succeeded by abandoning its most ambitious requirement.